Welcome everybody to the last session on sentiment analysis and opinion mining. We had to skip the first talk because the author couldn't come due to illness. And from now on, we continue with the remaining 3 talks. So the first of them is going to be on sentiment analysis of the People's Daily by Jiwei Li and Eduard Hovy, and it's going to be presented by Jiwei Li. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm Jiwei from Stanford. This is joint work with Eduard Hovy. The focus of this paper is on how we can perform sentiment analysis. Not restricted to a specific sentence or specific document, but a collection of documents within a long period of time. By long period of time, I mean maybe a couple of decades or tens of years. So over the past 20 years, we have overwhelmingly seen the successfulness of applying in terms of using a statistical model for sentiment analysis or extraction at token level, sentence level, or document level. Basically, we represent the text unit that we are interested in with a set of features, and we feed these features into a kind of machine learning algorithms. And yeah, so what is missing from the previous work, as we call it here, is the long-term sentiment analysis, which indicates the sentiment towards a specific entity over a long period of time. The entity could be a food or a resort, say, okay, how people's taste changes, taste changes over maybe 40 years, or the resort, say, maybe 40 years ago, people would like to spend their holiday in one particular place, but now they are not going to, they do not like visiting there. It could also be political issues or figures, indicating how people's attitudes towards one particular issue changes over time. One particular task we look at in this work is about news articles, and it's about diplomatic relations. Why we look at this particular types of data set is because it's kind of hard to get the data set for kind of reviews for 40 years of food. But if you look at New York Times, I mean, published in the over the past 40 or 50 years, and if you look at the kind of diplomatic relation fluctuation between, say, USA or Soviet reunion or Russia, there could be a lot to work on here. And also, if you look at, there must be a stark difference of tunes taken by a New York Times before, towards the entity of Afghanistan, before and after 9/11. So in this work, we focus our attention on the diplomatic relations about news articles. The one types of particular newspaper we look at in this work is called the People's Daily, which is the governmental newspaper printed in the People's Republic of China. The very reason we look at this particular resource is like this sort of newspaper usually directly reflects the viewpoints of Chinese official governments. And if you consider the drastic social and political changes taken in mainland China over the past 60 years, this data source might be a good source for this specific task. And also, if you consider in the 1960s, the entity, say the country USA, is usually referred to as the kind of US imperialism, which is kind of a very negative word, and also the Western countries is usually referred to lackeys or these stuff. And also, as time goes on in the 20th century, we would, the newspaper would say a healthy, steady developmental relationship between China and the US conforms to the fundamental interest in both countries. And you can kind of identify these drastic sentiment changes over the past 40 or 50 years. And we try to be more technical and less political. Here's the outline of this presentation. I'm going to first get to the major challenges involved in this work, and then I'm going to detail the model and experimental results, followed by a brief conclusion. So one major challenge involved in this work is news articles published in those days usually contain multiple entities and multiple sentiments, which means the article usually praise the allies and criticize the enemies at the same time. For instance, if we look at the one news articles containing the keyword, say, the United States, and here's an example. As we can see, the article first says the U.S. imperialism set up a puppet regime in Vietnam, which indicates the very negative attitudes towards the anti-U.S. However, the news articles is going to next turn to the entity called the Peoples of Vietnam, which is, say, People's Vietnam prevailed over the modern equipped U.S. troops. That indicates the positive attitudes. To go on, the newspaper, the article, switch over to the entity called Johnson's government. Johnson's kind of the president of the United States during the time of Vietnam War, and towards which the articles is going to hold very negative attitudes. And then it switched back to the praise and positive attitudes towards the anti-army of Vietnam. As can be seen, the positive and negative attitudes switch back and forth, and they mix with each other. And if you look at this stuff, it's like there are two clusters of entities. The first cluster is kind of the positive entities, which include the people of Vietnam, the Workers' Party, and the Vietnam People's Army, towards which the articles holds positive about. However, because we are interested in modeling the attitudes towards the anti-United States, these entities are irrelevant, and it's not what we are interested in looking at. And also, another cluster of entities corresponds to the negative entities, which include U.S. imperialism, U.S. troops, Johnson's government. One particular thing to note here is, even though the anti-Johnson's government does not include the explicit mention of anti-U.S., it directly offers the evidence to what we are interested in, the attitudes towards the anti-United States. And if you consider that the play is not like a co-reference task, because these two entities do not point to one same entity. So another challenge is here, the articles published in those days include heavy use of linguistic phenomenon, like rhetoric, metaphor, proverb, or nicknames. For example, in those days, the anti-United States is usually referred to something called a tiger made of paper, which is kind of a metaphor indicating the things that are kind of strong outside but weak inside. However, identifying these kind of metaphor is a hard problem in nature. So to deal with these challenges, we predicate our work into two assumptions. The first assumption is that in a news article, sentiment towards one specific entity is constant. What can we get based on this assumption? It's like, okay, if we can first identify this article holds a negative attitudes towards anti-USA, then we can deduce that all the other kind of positive entities are irrelevant, that they're irrelevant to what we are interested in modeling. We can just ignore these sentences. Secondly, the second assumption we make in this work is over a certain period of time, sentiment towards one specific entity are interrelated. In this case, based on this assumption, if we can first identify that, okay, the news articles hold a negative sentiment towards the anti-USA within that period of time, we can, and then the phrase tiger made of paper is usually used to describe the anti-USA. We can then deduce that the tiger made of paper is a negative word. So here is the model. We first divide sentiments into 7 categories, ranging from 1 to 7, each of which corresponds to different levels of kind of diplomatic relations, say antagonism, tension, disharmony, neutrality, goodness, friendliness, and brotherhood. So for one specific entity, for example, USA or Vietnam, each sentence is associated with a kind of the sentiment score, which indicating the sentiment towards the entity E at current sentence. At document level, we associated it with a document level sentence score, sentiment score, and also at time level, we associated each time period with a time level sentiment score. And each period of time is comprised of a series of documents that are published within that period of time, and each document is comprised of a series of sentences within that document. And in that case, what we do next is we kind of model out this structure in a hierarchical way, where we presume that the document level sentiment score is sampled from the time level sentence score, and the sentence level sentence score is sampled from the document level sentence score. And also, if we consider our previous assumption that the sentiments at different times are correlated, we can kind of incorporate a kind of Markov property into the model, where we presume that the sentiment score at current time is sampled from a Poisson distribution parameterized by the sentiment score from early time. And in that way, we kind of modeled all the scores at sentence level, document level, and time level in a kind of Bayesian hierarchical structure. And we sampled the document level score from time level and the sentiment level scores from document level scores. So what we are going to next is we are going to get started with a few sample of sentences, the sentiment of which we are very confident about. So what we do next is, based on these sentiment scores, we kind of use the Gibbs sampling for the previous hierarchical structure to sample the time level score and document level score. And then, based on the document level score, we expand the entity cluster and subjective lexicon. Here I'm going to give a specific example. For example, if we are interested in modeling the attitudes towards the entity VNN, and we presumably know the sentiment score at that particular document is MD. And also, we are equipped with a small collection of subjective list of lexicons. For example, we say great is a very popular, very positive word, and evil is a very negative word. And we, for this particular document, we associate it with a entity list. We call it T. So what we do is here. So for the first sentence, for example, Vienna is a great country. It contains the entity VNN that we are interested in looking at, and the subjective word great. And we can directly inference the sentiment for this specific sentence. And then next, we go over all the sentences within this document, and we encounter the second sentence, the peoples of army are great. Because we already know that the great is a very positive word, we are gonna add the keyword people's VNN to these entity list. What we are doing next is we again go over all the sentences within that document, and we encounter the sentence people's army are heroic. Because even though we do not have any information about how positive or negative the word heroic is, but because based on our previous assumption that in one particular document, the attitudes towards one specific entity, here it is, people's army should be consistent. And we can deduce that the heroic is a very positive word. We are going to add the word heroic to the subjective list. And then next, we encountered the sentence like USA is an evil country, because we know that the document score for this particular article is very positive. However, the word evil is a negative word, so we are going to ignore this sentence. And the entity USA is not about what we are interested in looking at. It's irrelevant to the entity VNN. So what I just described is kind of ideal situations where our sentences are a kind of simple sentence like A is great, B is heroic, C is evil. But in real world cases, we would encounter more complicated sentences like, for example, Albania's Workers' Party is a glorious party, or like we strongly warn the Soviet kind of revisionism. So what we are going to do that is like we want to align these complicated sentence to the previous kind of simple format of sentence like A is great. So what we do is we we view this problem as being a target and expression extraction problem where the target corresponds to the words towards which the words or vocabularies or entities towards which the articles holds a kind of positive or negative attitudes towards, and the expressions indicates the expressions indicates the terms. Positive or sentiment terms, and in that case, A is great, B is evil, A and B are target, and great, evil, or expressions. Also, in the case Albania Workers' Party is glorious party, the entity Albania Workers' Party is kind of a target, and the glorious is an expression. And we turn a kind of semi-CRF model. We view that as a sequence identification task, and I'm going to skip the detail, and we manually labeled 600 Chinese sentences for token level identification. We used these types of features and put these features into CRF model, and we identify the target and expression tokens in the sentences in terms of target or expression extraction. So the summary of the model is like we first identify the target and expressions for the sentences, and we obtain sentiment scores for a few sentences whose expressions are found in the subjective list, and then we use skip sampling to estimate the document and time and level sentiment scores, and we use Bootstrap to expand the subjective list and entity clusters. And here are some examples. I'm going to skip them. So for experiments, we first evaluate the performance of semi-CRF. We compared the semi-CRF with standard CRF, and the experiment shows that semi-CRF model yields some kind of performance boost when we compare with CRF in terms of target and expression extraction. Also, we are going to evaluate the foreign relation evaluation. We get gold standards for quantitative political analysis from the Institute of Modern International Relations from Tsinghua University, and which their data set contains the sentiment score, monthly sentiment score between for China and for diplomatic relationship between China and other Western countries from 1950 to 2012. We compared the Pearson correlation between the scores provided by our system and the gold standard. For baselines, we employ the bootstrapping strategy where no time is incorporated, and also some feature-based document level SVR, support vector regression, and also supervised LDA. We fit the back and forth into these models. And here are some performance results that SVR and supervised LDA does not really work in this task because the a mixture of positive and negative sentiments, and by incorporating time information, we can get a better kind of Pearson correlation results when compared with gold standards. So here we present some analysis from some figures that demonstrate the relationships. Diplomatic relationships between China and other Western countries, over the past 60 years. And what is interesting is like the sentiment towards two opposing forces in the world are usually divergent. And if you consider the Sino-US relationship and Sino-Russian relationship, where the Sino-US relationship began to improve when the Sino-Russian Soviet Union relationship drops to its bottom. This is also the case for for the relationship between Pakistan and India, which is like corresponds to saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And also on the contrary, the attitudes towards two allies are usually constant if you consider the Sino-US relationship and Sino-Japan relationship, and also the Sino-Russian relationship and Sino-Vietnam relationship. So here's the conclusion. We propose a semi-supervised bootstrapping algorithms that harnesses higher level information like document level and time level. And we perform some quantitative evaluation of diplomatic relations that may facilitate political scientists' work. So we release our data set for target expression extraction, and thank you.
Any questions?
Thanks, nice talk. I'm wondering when you are interested in specific target entity like Vietnam, but when you go through the whole document, you need to know which aspects about the Vietnam the document is talking, which means you need to associate the People's Army to Vietnam.
Right.
Maybe there are some other attributes about this entity. So how do you do them? I mean, maybe there are two appearances of the People's Army, but they may be associated different entities.
So, I mean, what we all want to do is we just try to first cluster the entities based on their sentiments. And we assume that, okay, for this particular document, if we are going to get information or evidence from all the clusters of positive or negative entities. And did I answer your question? It's like if we can presume that, okay, the document, at that document level, the article holds positive and positive sentiment towards both Vietnam and People's Army. We are going to cluster these entities into one group. And we are going to use.
How can you show the People's Army is about the Vietnam? Maybe it's about
like,
India.
Yeah, it's like, because yeah, it's like the. Yeah, good question. So right, it's about here. It's like, okay, if we already know that okay, this article holds a positive attitude towards Vietnam. And we can say, okay, great is a kind of a positive subjective lexicon, and the word great is used to describe the People's Army. And then we presume that the
okay, because they are
right.
both positive, so
right,
you
right.
associate People's Army to Vietnam.
Exactly, right. Just
okay.
cluster the entities based on their sentiments. No external information is used.
Okay,
right.
okay, yeah, I see it. Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't get the difference between CRF and semi-CRF.
Right, I'm sorry?
CRF and semi-CRF, you said semi,
yes.
What is semi-CRF?
Oh, yeah, sorry, because of time limit, I did not describe detail. So semi-CRF is a kind of CRF that releases the token constraint. It makes decisions at segment level. It's like it first kind of cut a sentence into a few pieces and directly make a decision at segment level. I mean, in CRF, you made decision regarding each of the tokens, one token by another one, but semi-CRF is like, one segment can contain multiple words, and it directly make. So if you consider the word like People's Army, that includes two entities. So we want to make decision at both, at the segment level.
But it is still supervised model, like
yeah,
the normal CRF.
Yeah, it's
okay.
It is, yeah. Right, but yeah, there also kind of, the word semi is kind of ambiguous. It's like
yes.
You can associate it with kind of semi-supervised. Right, it's not that case. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. So you have a very curious data set, which is, has some funny facts and interesting things, but is there anything special about this data set? I mean, are data sets that this kind of technique can be applied, and is there anything, what makes you work on this data set, People's Daily?
Right, I think the very reason is like that data set, it's kind of governmental data set. It's like it can usually directly reflects the viewpoints of Chinese official government. And also if you consider the drastic social and political changes taking place in China, in mainland China over the past 60 years, that might make this data source a kind of suitable source for this specific task. And also I think you can find similar kind of results if you work on kind of New York Times or use kind of official newspapers from other countries. I think another reason why I work on this data set is because I know Mandarin, I know Chinese, yeah. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, let's thank the speaker.
Thanks.